lost on me that I have not made a video in a while, and there's probably some of you watching that would kind of like an update. The little Dakota is all fixed up and it's sold. I sold it to a couple of guys that just needed something to help their mom, like work on their house and haul some OSB and stuff. So that was almost like a charity thing, but I got my money back out of it that I'd spent, and I feel good about the people who have it now and doing good things with it. A few months ago, I took the red and black Squarebody to my friends over at Exotic Motorsports in Edmond, Oklahoma, and they consigned it for me and got it sold. Although it turns out, I know the guy's son who bought it. It went to Texas, by the way. So if you're watching, I hope you're enjoying that truck. We're in Daddy Bill right now because it's time to start tearing into this OBS. And a while back, a good friend of mine bought a race car, Chevy 2 Nova. And he said he was going to buy, or I think he bought an LSX 454 engine and was going to get rid of the 6.0 that's in it. So we are on our way to his storage right now, and we're going to check that out. And we may end up buying that engine to put in old Daddy Bill. How come it's got dust on it? Oh no, you don't mind if I film, right?
No, I'll be quiet.
Oh yeah, it's either way, it makes for good videos.
Yeah, do what you need to.
Let's see what we got going on. So yeah, dual valve springs, looks like titanium retainers, definitely has the trunnion upgrade, and it looks like some pretty hefty chromoly push rods. Looks like some ARP head studs also. So somebody put it together with love. It's not a return style, so I guess that pump's just got a...
Yeah, well, it's been dry for a while.
I believe it's got fuel dumping in there. Yeah, we're getting that. Quick truck change, and we're back to get it. Conditioner's broke. I mean, we gotta drive it. It's nice and smooth. Woo, this thing will go. Now that we've got this engine out and home, and obviously on a stand separated from the transmission, let's talk about it for a second. To be completely fair, this engine was essentially an unknown, and when my friend bought the car, he wasn't interested in the engine specifically as the chassis and everything that went along with it. As you guys saw, and it had some good parts under it. So if we find anything scary in here, I'm not going to be upset with the person who sold it to me. You know, we both agreed on a price that we knew we were kind of taking a risk. I did get it with the intake and the carburetor. This is a Holley 850. Part number 1808 or whatever this, maybe this 670201. I'm sure you carb guys can probably explain that better. It does have the MSD box to run your ignition coils, and here's the harnesses with it. And I got that starter as well. Outside of what we saw under the valve covers, we know that it is a 6-liter block for sure. Can't really tell if it's been into or not based on these bolts. It is a little grimy and stuff down here. So since we've got it sitting on the stand, I'll probably tear it apart a little bit. I noticed there's some residue on the crank pulley, so balancer crank pulley. So we'll probably replace this seal and the rear seal, just again, because we have it out. So what I'm gonna do is I wanna pull this valve cover and check those push rods. They look like they were potentially the 3/8 thickness, and then we're gonna pull the pan. Yeah, number 8 intake valve is definitely not under a load, or the spring is not compressed, so we'll pull this one loose to check that push rod. See much wear on these rocker arms either. So it looks like they may have replaced the rockers when they did the trunnion upgrade, which are these clips here to keep the bearings from coming out of the end. You guys could see that process on my F100 build when we built that 6.0 for it. And this push rod, yep, 7162 Comp Cams Magnum is printed on there. And they are in fact the 3/8 thickness, which is kind of a dead giveaway when you see them tapered down like this at the tip, because a 5/16 typically is this size, as it says on the caliper, and then it just maintains that same diameter all the way down. I am admittedly very tempted to just pull all the rocker arms, pull all the push rods, get some magnets in there, raise up those lifters, or put dowel pins in there. But I just have to resist tearing it all the way down. It's a completely fine running engine, so just leave it. Inside the pan here made me a little nervous at first. I thought those were giant chunks, but it's actually just kind of like part of the casting on the bottom of this pan. It's not really trashing the oil. And this, I'm about to get a light, but it looks like stock rods in there. Scoped through the spark plug hole as best I could. Maybe you guys can tell me if this valve looks like it's had a valve job on it or not. Hard for me to know. Also, the pistons all just look like stock flat tops from, again, the best that I can tell. So we really didn't learn much there, except there's nothing real super fancy. Underneath, found it interesting. They do look like they're stock rods and stock pistons. But if you'll notice, that one's been stamped, and they are all stamped, which tells me that at some point they were concerned about putting them back in the right spot. So it's been apart. Otherwise, yeah, this didn't get marked like this from the factory. Potentially for balancing, I don't know. Again, they look like stock rods and stock pistons to the best of my ability. And you can see some cross-hatching there on the cylinder walls. For reference, this is a stock 5.3 rod that I just pulled out of an engine earlier this week. You can kind of see the similar markings inside that piston and the shape of the rods. Here's a little Amazon purchase. I think it was 47 bucks. And this is a lower gasket kit. By the way, I don't think I showed this clearly. The 6014 LS controller from MSD. Anyway, lower gasket kit, which is kind of what we need to change out these front and rear mains and both of the front and rear plates, and then covers and oil pan vac on, and oil pickup tube O-ring. So check out this little gasket kit. I was pretty happy with the pricing and what it came with. Gasket, rear plate, front cover plate gasket, front seal, rear seal. Well, this has a water pump gasket and a paper oil cooler, 2 oil cooler gaskets. And then this little guy right here, I can't remember where that goes, to be honest with you. I do know most of these though. There's your pickup tube gasket options, oil cooler gasket options, water pump gasket, and these little O-rings here, I'm not sure what they are. Anyway, I like this little kit, and I hope you guys are screaming at me in the comments about these ones I didn't know. Ugh, filthy. All right, it's a little bit better. Now, I think some people, I've seen it in motors I've torn down, will put like RTV on the outside of this seal. I mean, if it's a brand new seal and it's pliable like it should be, you shouldn't really need any of that. They go in pretty easy, and then you can just kind of flush them up. That's real nice. All right, now that we have our oil pump pickup tube O-ring ready to go, I'm gonna go ahead and install the windage tray and that pickup tube, and then we'll start worrying about getting the covers aligned before we install them. So our kit came with 3 O-rings to choose from, like blue, I guess red or green, colorblind, and black. This is the color that was on it, and it is definitely not circular. It's been flattened out, as you can see. It's pretty common on these LS's when someone pinches the O-ring and causes low oil pressure condition. Well, that was a whole different animal getting that in there. I like it a lot. So this pan had the rivets holding the gasket to it, which leads me to believe whenever they rebuilt or overhauled or did something to this engine, they never even bothered with new oil pan gaskets. They just reused it. Which explains also that O-ring being so flat. Engine has like a $400 set of push rods, like $700 bolt kit for the heads, for the studs, but didn't want to spend $47 for a lower gasket kit. So these front and rear covers, by the way, the gaskets kind of only go one way, so you're not going to mess that up. The holes in the covers are much larger than the diameter of the bolt, and that's to allow you to align them with the crankshaft in mind. so you don't off-center it and end up with an oil leak. They actually make alignment tools that you can set in here to center this up and then tighten your plate down. I do not spend my money on such frivolous things, because if your engine leaks oil a little bit, that's how you know it's got oil. So you're probably asking, what do you do? Well, you get all the bolts to where they're just finger tight and you can move this, but it's not gonna move easily. And find a punch or something like this, whatever you have laying around. You may go to, and you find a certain diameter, and then you can lay it in between this crank and that seal and sort of feel when it drags and when it doesn't. And that'll give you an idea kind of which direction you may need to give it a little tappy tap until you have no drag or an equal amount of drag all the way around the crank, making contact with that lip seal. And then snug these things down, kind of crisscross patterns slowly so you don't get movement, and recheck it. With those all torqued down and verified center, I'm gonna go ahead and put the pan on, even though I haven't done the rear plate yet, because it's gonna have to be hanging from an engine hoist to do that rear cover. So it can be aligned and done with the pan still installed. I just wanted to point out, I'll put a little bit of RTV silicone at these two mating surfaces, and I mean just a very little, otherwise they'll squish out and make a mess. And then you'll see that whenever I do the rear cover plate, rear seal, I'll just put a little bit in that crack whenever I put the rear panel on. Well, here's some good news. We now can look up what type of cam is in our engine. I'll put the specs on the screen right now, but basically it's just a baby cam, a little stage 2 truck cam from Comp, 226, 237 duration, 540 lift on both sides, and 113 lobe separation angle. You'll notice with that small amount of lift, it doesn't even require valve springs. So I found it interesting that it has dual valve springs on it and these super heavy duty push rods with the baby cam. So that's the basic rundown on our engine. We now know what it's got in it, what it doesn't have in it, freshened up all the gaskets and seals. Those are the common things to leak. Also, I guess I didn't talk about it, but this is the flex plate that you need if you're running an older style transmission, like not 4L60, 4L80. If you're running 700R or Turbo 350, Turbo 400, Power Glide, you've got to run this with the little spacer. So I'm glad that it already came with that. So I've got that Loctited on those bolts and put back on. One thing I do believe, and you guys put comments down below if you're experts on this, because I certainly am not, this 850 double pumper carburetor has got to be too much for this engine, because the math that you do, you take this, I don't know, was it 347 or whatever the cubic inches are? Oh, no, 364, whatever. Take the cubic inches of the engine times the maximum RPM, which based on the cam specs, 6,600 is where it runs out of power. And you divide it by 3, 4, 5, 6 or something. You'll see it on the screen. And then you also have to, when you calculate that, that'll tell you the CFM that this engine can ingest. And then you have to kind of compensate for some volumetric efficiency. So even if this thing is perfect, you could say it's like 95% efficient. So you multiply that number by 0.95, and that gives you even lower amount of cubic feet per minute that this engine can ingest. So a 750 would be way plenty. The experts that I've looked into say that whatever it says on the carb, it flows more than that on the newer style carbs. So again, a 750 would be great. This 850 is certainly a lot for this almost stock engine. So we may deal with that as it comes. I appreciate you guys sticking with me on this video. I think it's pretty exciting. This is a major first purchase for it. I've got some other stuff bought and shipping, and I don't know, it may be a while before we have our next video, but there will be one. Thanks for watching.